Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me for another Growth Secrets interview. I'm here with Barrett Bogue. Barrett is an Iraq War veteran. He spent a number of years in the nonprofit space, and now he is building his business where he is connecting organizations and corporations with the military-connected community. He's doing a great job of it. We had an awesome conversation. Barrett's a really knowledgeable guy. He's got a lot of great experience that I'm excited for him to share with us today. So Barrett, thank you so much for joining me.
Reed, it's my pleasure to be with you and to talk with the group here and to share my just a very interesting journey through where I find myself today as an entrepreneur.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to hear it. So tell us about that background. Tell us about that journey. Maybe take it from, as far back as you want to go. I'm excited to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, I'm an Iraq War veteran, and in between my bachelor and my master's degree at the University of Tennessee, I took what I call as a gap year and spent it in Iraq. And when I came back to the University of Tennessee, I found a school that was incredibly open to my experience and willing to bring me back in. But I also noticed that there was a lack of programmatic support for military veterans in higher education. And so that's how my passion and my interest was born. Is I was fascinated by the veteran experience in higher education. And that's where a lot of my master's research focused. And I was able to use that passion and that research into a program called the Presidential Management Fellows Program. It's run through the Office of Management and Budget. And I found an opportunity at the Department of Veterans Affairs in their GI Bill office. And they found me, they found my resume, they reached out to me, and they said my background in higher ed and also being a veteran was attractive to them. So I took on a role there as an analyst, and one of the first things that I ever did, this would be 2007, is I had this piece of proposed legislation in Congress on my desk. And it was from the then Senator Jim Webb from Virginia. And he was a former Marine. His son is a Marine. And he had introduced legislation called a new GI Bill for a new century. And his objective was to significantly increase the amount of money that veterans get going into higher education. So I had this on my desk, and my role was to analyze its impact and its cost. And we worked with the budget team, and we came up with a cost estimate of $100 billion over 10 years. Now, you have to remember, at the time, the federal government was only paying approximately $2.5–3 billion annually. To go from $3 billion annually to over $10 billion annually was extremely unlikely. And so I remember we all kind of laughed at that and said, there's no way that this is going to happen. And 12 months later, it was law. And we had this new GI Bill program. And what took place over the next year and a half was building out the nation's largest federal entitlement program for higher ed. It was a wonderful, wonderful journey. And part of that was realizing that the GI Bill needed a greater media and brand presence. And we did a number of different things. We did TV ad buys, a media campaign, radio campaign, print, etc. And we did a NASCAR race as well. We sponsored a NASCAR race. But one area that I was really kind of hyping on was social media. And so I made this recommendation for placing the GI Bill brand within Facebook. And this would have been 2008, 2009, when placing brands on Facebook, even in a Facebook page or a group, was still relatively new. And so we did that. It was extremely effective. And that's when I sort of made this connection on the importance of using media to tell your story and your brand story, especially in finding non-traditional ways. And so what followed, Reed, was a 12-year career of making an impact for veterans in higher education. And in that entire time in working with partners and meeting with private companies and nonprofit companies, I always heard the same sort of feedback is we really struggle to reach veterans. And they were coming to me as the GI Bill representative to tell GI Bill students about this product or this service or this school. And they would all say, we really have a difficult time reaching the military connected community. And so I kind of tucked that away as a potential business and a potential problem to solve for customers. And so about 18 months ago, I made the decision to leave the nonprofit space in an executive role and to found my company to help business and nonprofit leaders access and impact the military connected community. So it's something that I've been kind of working on as far as identifying a business opportunity for nearly a decade, but did not decide to turn it into a company or a full-time business idea until about 18 months ago when we founded Evocati.
Okay, so that is a really nice segue. I mean, you even use the term, identifying a business opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about this in almost every one of these interviews, and I really believe that what entrepreneurs do is that we identify problems in the marketplace and we fix them for money, right?
Yeah.
Really clear. Maybe people don't like how straightforward that is, but that's what we do. So I love to hear about the process that entrepreneurs and business leaders have gone through and that they went through to identify, hey, this is a problem and we can solve this thing and there's a market for it. What was that process like? Was that something that throughout your time, working in government, nonprofit, you were like, someone needs to fix this, someone needs to fix this? Or was it something that you kind of decided, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur, let me go find a problem? What was that process like?
So I think that's a great question. And so I'll explain that, but before I do, just really quick, let me explain it. Evocati is a professional service firm of one, really. And what we do is we provide one-on-one consulting services, and in some cases, some operational services for companies that have a program, that have a product, or they want to make they want access into the military connected community. So we come on board, we help them do that. We have the ability to scale if we need to, hiring independent contractors and other experts. And I want to talk a little bit more about that later. But you asked, like, how did I come up with that and what was that process like? So I think it starts with the way that I've seen the entrepreneurial journey, and sometimes we're guilty of thinking of it this way, is in terms of how we age. You start out as this idea starts out in infancy, and then it's it's incubated, and then it's born, and then it grows, and then it matures, and that's your business your business idea, and that's how you approach entrepreneurship. I don't think that's true, and that's not been my experience, and so the way that I would describe it is like this. I'm a sculptor, and my business idea is this big like chunk of marble sitting in front of me, and I'm just spending time taking away marble until I've created this business idea that is marketable, profitable, and scalable. So it's a great question, Reed. I have been working on that for over a decade, but I didn't really start chiseling in earnest until about 18 months ago. So I'm still in this process, right? And I love that. I'm still trying to discover, like, what is the one thing that I can offer my customers or my clients that's going to satisfy them tomorrow. I've got essentially a menu of things that we can do, but I'm still trying to find, like, what is that one or two ideas or service that we can offer that I can make money off of and that I can scale. And what I've learned over the past 18 months is that as long as you're still sculpting, right? I've just found that to be incredibly satisfying. There's going to be failures on that road to success, but as long as I'm still trying to chisel out that idea, um, I feel very confident about where we are as a company.
So, Barrett, you have hit on something that comes up in so many of these conversations.
Yeah.
The idea of testing, tweaking. You described it differently. I love the way that you put that. Of right, this it starts as this big piece of marble or this big piece of rock, and you're chiseling away until it is. And I have a friend who's a sculptor, and he says, "Look, I start with this big block of whatever, and I keep taking stuff away that doesn't look like the final product I have in my head." Right, and that I think is what we do as business owners and as business leaders. But you hit on another thing that comes up a ton is you're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna embarrass yourself here or there, and then there's an opportunity to say, well, that doesn't work, right? So that's another one of those things we're not going to do anymore, and that is an invaluable part of growing a business.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if we use that analogy, you've found a vein in the marble that doesn't align with your final product. So you just chisel it away. It's there, it started there, but it's perfectly fine. It's not going to be part of that final product. And so that's where I am today. I will tell you that with Evocati, we're open to any company that wants to make an impact in the military connected community. It could be a company that wants to hire more veterans. It could be a company that wants to start a veteran employee group, an internal veteran employee group. You may have a program or an event, et cetera, that you want to do within the military connected community. And that's where Evocati comes in. What I have found is that there's a lot of opportunity within the higher education space. And primarily that's, for one reason, that's because that's my background, but also because of the significant growth of the number of veterans enrolling in higher education since 2009. A lot of schools have not been built around that adult learning experience. They're built around the traditional, 18-year-old dorm, et cetera, experience, and they're great at that. You know, as veterans, we're non-traditional students. We're more likely to be older, married, have children, have a full or part-time job, and be living or diagnosed with a disability. And we're coming into the higher ed environment, and so schools are simply they're motivated to bring more veterans onto campus, but they don't know how. And so I'm seeing business opportunities in that areas as well. All that to say is, even I at 18 months into this, I don't have everything solved. I'm still trying to find out where our marketplace is as well, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, so you mentioned something, and at the risk of going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but I'm just so interested by this, so I have to
Mhm.
ask you. You talk about higher education, and I think that, and you may agree, that higher education is going to see a lot of change over the next decade, we'll call it, for so many reasons. Obviously, if you're watching this, guys, and if you haven't seen the news, there's some stuff happening in the world. So that is going to change it, right?
Yeah.
And then this idea of more military veterans going into higher education, all of those things are going to drastically change this very traditional 20th century model of college being for 18 to 22-year-olds who are figuring life out. And if you've been to college in at least the last 10 or 15 years, you probably didn't learn a whole lot, and you got an expensive piece of paper, right? That model is likely to change. I'm so curious to know what you think about, like, what does it look like when it becomes, for lack of a better word, a more professional setting, where people who are going home to their wife and kids and maybe are working more, a job during their time in college more often than than the typical 18 to 22-year-old who just got out of high school is?
So it's a great question. It's something. It's an area that I've explored professionally as a researcher. It's an area that I've talked with lawmakers and policymakers, and then finally, it's an area that I work in as an entrepreneur. So while we're recording this video, we're in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. My family in particular, we're in week 7 of lockdown in our home. And, 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, the entire higher education industry in America, so we're talking 10 to 12,000 institutions, completely changed their business model in 2 weeks. They all went to online. It's an unprecedented scale and impact. And I think what I'm more interested in learning and knowing as a result of that is that going to result in this preference cascade amongst learners for online learning? Or are students going to say, you know what, I tried online learning and I didn't like it? But I will say this, it's leading to some very difficult conversations in higher education over how it's structured and who it's built to serve. So we know that by 2025, approximately a quarter of all learners in higher ed will be adult learners. We know that the population of prospective students, high school students, going into higher education has been decreasing by about 5% annually. And that's not because of grades or anything, it's just because it's demographics. So there's going to be a smaller recruitable population. And then the third thing is you've got these institutions that are over leveraged. They have older buildings, they've taken on too much debt, etc. So will there be a preference cascade for online learning? If there is, then there's a lot less need for admin and staff overhead in buildings. So what the trends were before the coronavirus pandemic was that higher education was in the process of slowly turning around like a massive ship in the sea to address the needs of adult learners. And what makes veterans interesting in that role is we are the tip of the spear in that respects. So when you think of an adult learner, they're over the age of 24, they have a part-time or full-time job, they have children, and they're married. They have obligations outside of higher education. They're much less likely to stay on campus. Their preference is going to be ideally to take a combination of online and in-person learning. And they may not go to the same school throughout their entire higher ed career. They may start in community college, they may transfer over, etc. So if you're not building your learning environment, if you're not building your campus around the needs of an adult learner, for example, do you have a combination of online and in-person classes? Do you offer childcare on campus? Do you have open enrollment periods? One of the biggest complaints that I hear from military veterans is they can go to this for-profit school that may not actually have very good outcomes, and you may not be placed in a job, but I can enroll in this for-profit school tomorrow. But if I qualify for a nonprofit or a public school, they're going to say, that's great. Come back in March when the application season is open. Well, that's not very helpful for an adult learner. So what I found and what my company has found is there are institutions of higher education that want to recruit more military veterans as a way to better align their entire institution to support the adult learner population. And so what we've done for a couple of clients is we've gone in and we've done market opportunity research to look at the number of military veterans in your state and your surrounding states. We've done on-site interviews and quantitative research with your student population, and we've identified some of the needs of those students on campus, and we've built out a recommended program to not only attract more military connected students, but also to better support them on campus. So it's I suspect that this is only going to accelerate, especially if the trend lines that we see in the economy historically, as the economy has slowed down, more people have gone into higher education. They can't enter the workforce, they can't find a job, but they can enroll in their local college, their local community college. They can go get another degree, they can retrain, etc. They can qualify for federal Pell Grants, federal loans, or the GI Bill. So as the economy slows down or gets worse, what we generally see is an increase in enrollment in higher education. And that's going to present more opportunities to align your mission around the needs of adult learners. And that's where Evocati can help do that with schools that want to increase the number of veterans on campus.
Okay, I love that insight, because number one, I think that there's this false, I guess, dichotomy is that we're going from 100% traditional, on-campus school to a 100% digital. That's never really how it works in practice, right? We never go from one end of the spectrum all the way to the other. I think it's almost definitely a mix of the two, and those numbers are really interesting. I did not realize some of those statistics that you threw out, and I did not know that it was that plain to see that that it was changing for higher ed. So that is super interesting to see, and yeah, I'm really curious to see what it looks like and how this recent event has accelerated that, because I'm curious how many people are going to go back and say, that worked just fine for me. That doing things digitally, because I could still do my job. I could still, take care of my kids. I could still attend to my family needs, and that worked fine. And I don't know. And I would hope that institutions will not push back too hard to try to preserve some dogmatic approach to education, right? And I think some will, certainly, but some won't. And I think those that adapt and change will do well. So let's transition then, because you mentioned how Evocati can help. What is, and this is the other part of that entrepreneurial journey, right? It's we have to find a problem in the marketplace, create a system and a process in a business around fixing it, and then we got to get it into the hands of people that'll give us money for it, right? So that's sales and marketing. So what does your process look like today for Evocati?
So, like I said at the beginning, is we've been in business for 18 months. So that process is evolving, and I've enjoyed the challenge of discovery and what works well and what doesn't. I can tell you, Reed, I recall vividly when I left my role in the nonprofit space, and the next week I was sitting at my desk and I was like, well, what now? I knew I wanted to do this, but I honestly, there was a moment there where I felt completely overwhelmed by the prospect of not having a salary and being responsible for my own income in this. And at the time, I just had an idea in my head. So I started where I think a lot of you all can relate is I was like, well, I need a website. So the very first thing I did was I designed a brand around my identity and background. Evocati is Latin for reservist, which is what I was in the military. The Evocati were actually the legionnaires who served 16 years and agreed to be a force in reserve for then Caesar Augustus. So they were the first concept of a professional reserve force. I like that. I like the military background. I did not want the company branding to be overt military. I wanted it to look and be more aligned with academia. So that's why I chose a Latin name. So I did that, and
Can I say, Barrett, this is
yeah,
another one of those things in common. I
yeah,
mentioned that I've interviewed 5 or 6 different military veterans or now entrepreneurs. Probably 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6, their business name is some variation or some play on a Latin word. So there,
yeah,
that that has to be something that they just that they ingrain in you guys
yeah.
is all of the Latin words and the uses of Latin. I just think
Yeah,
that's
well,
so funny.
like when you think about it, I didn't want red, white, blue. I didn't want eagles or stars. So you kind of get limit yourself and what else is available. And I was like, well, I don't want to name it after something in the military. So it's like I'll go Latin. But I think that's great. Great minds think alike. So we did a website. Um, the best piece of advice I got, Reed, when I started in this journey was this: start out and do the best pro bono work that you can. And I did that. So I did pro bono consulting for a company, that a nonprofit that builds specially adapted homes for wounded warriors, and help them with some branding and marketing. And it was also for me to just kind of test the waters. And it worked so well that they provided referrals, and they gave me feedback on my performance, et cetera. And I was able to use that to prospect for other clients. Um, so the first piece of advice I would have is, if you're starting this out, um, and you can do it and you can afford it, do the best pro bono work with a client that you can, to start building out that base, to start increasing referrals. Um, that can only pay dividends. Like I said, I built the website, and I had a decision regarding social media. I think a lot of us entrepreneurs make the mistake of thinking if we build it, they will come. And just because you have a Twitter, an Insta, a Facebook, and a LinkedIn, if you say, well, we're on all these platforms, I hear that, and that doesn't actually mean much to me. I'm more interested in, where are you having conversations, and what are those conversations like? That's why, Reed, I really like your group and what you're trying to do. You have a very tight-knit community around a unified experience and around a very interesting subject matter. So I didn't want Evocati to be everywhere. And for another reason is because it's just me. So we focused in on LinkedIn as the platform for the professional community. And we have been advertising and having conversations there exclusively for over a year now. And I have found it to be incredibly beneficial, engaging higher ed, engaging the military veteran community, et cetera. And then the last thing is simply going to be client referrals. The best thing you can do as an entrepreneur is to, well, besides solving this problem, is to seek feedback from your customers or your clients over what worked well, and what you can improve. And I have generally found that my past clients are the best referral network that I can have, right up there with LinkedIn. LinkedIn is great for driving conversations. It's great for featuring the work that you're doing. This conversation right here, I'm going to put up on LinkedIn when it's out. But the referral network that you can build up through your client base could be a big benefit for you.
So I completely agree. And for those of you watching, I want to highlight 3 things that Barrett said. So the first thing is that he started building a track record of great work by doing stuff for free. And that may not be necessarily an option for you to just give away your services straight up. But you can give away your expertise, you can give away your experience in very simple terms. Using what I do, we call that content marketing, right? Where you're giving away information for free. Frank Kern says that the best way to show people that you can help them is to actually help them, right? And then let that do the talking. So that's the first thing. Figure out what you can do for free to prove that you can do a great job. The second thing he said was that he picked a platform that he knew he could really go all in on and he could really perform well. And that was LinkedIn for Barrett. It may be a different platform for you, right? I would rather see you pick one and really go in and leverage it to the hilt rather than spread yourself so thin that you're not really making an impact anywhere, right? So if you have the time and you have the bandwidth for only one, then pick one. That's fine. The third thing is that he built a referral network of the past clients that he had done business with and he had gotten great results for. I would pay easily, a few $1,000s for those testimonials where my clients have said, Reed did this. He took us from this to this, right? I would happily pay for those. Now, I've earned those, and Barrett has earned those. Those are worth their weight in gold. As a marketer, all we really do is show the world what you already are, right? Yep. We just help to get you from where you are to them. We can't make you a better business than you actually are. And one of the greatest tools for that is to take those happy customers and get their message of how happy they are for having worked with you out to new potential customers, right? So people will say things like, well, word of mouth doesn't work. Word of mouth is the greatest tool. But if you just hope that word of mouth helps you scale your business, I got really bad news for you. That's not how it works. Leveraging word of mouth is a great way to grow and scale your business. So I just wanted to share those three things, those three takeaways that I'm getting from what Barrett's talking about for how he's growing his business, because those are excellent, excellent lessons. So
yeah, can I build on that?
Please, yeah, please.
So I'm in complete agreement, and the additional perspective that I would offer here for especially for first-time entrepreneurs. And this is something that you and I learned when we were talking earlier about our background in marketing is there's a maxim from I think it's Ben Franklin, who said, well done is better than well said. And too often, first-time entrepreneurs, and you know what, I see this mistake within the CEO ranks is they confuse publicity with impact. And publicity has a role, but publicity is not going to translate into clients and business opportunities. If you say, well, my brand is now exposed on Twitter, we just got a Tumblr, which I don't know why you would have a Tumblr, but we're on all these different platforms. You come and tell me that, and what I'm hearing is we're just throwing stuff out there and see what sticks up on a wall. Publicity like that is not necessarily going to, at least in my experience, has not translated into customers, paying customers for that matter. And so, Reed, you're absolutely right, is to hyper focus on an area or platform that you're familiar with and have engaging conversations that drive the narrative forward, whether it's growth secrets, whether it's, what is this entrepreneur going through? In my case, it's, what's the problem in the military connected community that this client is trying to solve? It's not see us here and look at what we're doing and check out our website and look at our really cool brand. There is so much noise around that within the marketing space that I've actually just become accustomed to tuning that out. I don't know about you, Reed, but I would say that I would double down on what you said is if you find yourself frustrated at all of the marketing that you're doing across all these channels, scale back. Start today and scale back on the channel that you're doing. So thanks, Reed. Thanks for letting me share that additional perspective.
Oh yeah, so that is, and this is kind of bringing the conversation full circle, guys. What we talked about towards the beginning was stripping away all of the pieces of this raw, stone, or this raw marble that is your business, until it starts to look like the ideal business, right? The business that can scale. And I tell people all the time, there's nothing wrong with just killing something that's not working. Barrett and I shared this during our chat before we went live, was that I have no qualms about experimenting with something. Now, be smart about it. Take data, collect some data, learn stuff from it. But if it's not working, just kill it. There's nothing. In fact, I encourage it. A lot of times I'll come in to a client situation and I'm like, you're doing way too much. Like, you don't even have a funnel that works, like any part of this works, right? Let's figure out one piece of this, and let's get it all the way from customers to paying you money, right? Let's get that figured out. Then we'll introduce some other channels, or we'll bring back some of these other channels. We got to kill some of this stuff. So that's great insight, and that's great advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Barrett, I could keep you forever, I think, but I've used up enough of your time, and I want to be sensitive to that. But I really want people to be able to continue to follow you and your story. How can they get connected with you? How can they learn more about you and Evocati?
Yeah, absolutely. So evocatillc.com. Go visit our website. You can learn a little bit more about our founding, some of the folks that work with us, and then our current and past clients. And then, like I said before, we are exclusively on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn group. Join the LinkedIn group. Just search Evocati LLC. And then send me a connection request on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to. For me, part of the entrepreneurial journey is having these conversations and mentoring other folks who are in the same position. More than happy to connect and chat on LinkedIn as well.
That's great. And folks, we'll make sure to leave the links to those things and to Barrett's LinkedIn profile. If you want to send him a connection request, we'll leave the links here in the comments. If you're watching later on YouTube, it will be in the description. If you're listening to the podcast, it will be in the show notes. And if you're seeing the smoke signal go by, then you should get a computer and listen, or a phone, and listen to this thing for real. That's my dad joke of the day.
I love it.
So guys, thank you so much for being a part of this today. And Barrett, thank you so much for sitting down with me and having this great conversation. Folks, give me some feedback. Let me know what your thoughts are on this interview series. I'd love to hear it. I'm always looking to figure out how we can make this better and more valuable to you, the audience. So leave a comment, send me a note, shoot me a text message. I want to hear it. But until next time, thank you all so much for joining me, and we'll see you on the next one.